Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff operations officer, assisted the national security team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the vice commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kevin McMahill, and I'm the sheriff of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. We are here this afternoon to provide some significant updates to the vehicle-borne improvised explosive device and suicide at the Trump Hotel. We have uncovered additional documents and information we feel it is important to share with you all. I will reiterate again, however, to you that with this new information comes more questions than answers. I will not provide an opinion on what the documents mean, nor will we release information or documents that have not been completely verified by our joint investigators. As I said, the joint investigation, again, is being conducted by LVMPD, the FBI, and the ATF, and we've been working this thing around the clock since it happened. In regards to some of the developments, I want to talk to you just a little bit about the fact that on the cell phone of our suspect, we discovered a much larger 6-page, what we're describing as a manifesto. This is in addition to the previously released 2 letters and the email that was sent to the mentioned podcast host. On this particular 6-page document, there is material that we still have not been able to work completely through with our federal partners and the Department of Defense, and some of that material may be classified, so we will not be releasing that document yet in its entirety. You will see some excerpts from that document here in just a few moments. New evidence has also emerged that this death was a suicide and that a VBIED or a car bomb was used in the incident. We'll talk a little bit about that. Of particular note, we also have clear evidence in this case now that the suspect used ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, to help plan his attack. I'd also like to note that in these documents, you will see that the suspect believed he was being followed all the way from Colorado. And I want to make it clear that our suspect in this case has never had a criminal history, nor was he on the radar of the FBI or the LVMPD prior to this bombing. For some of the significant updates.
That's right. We've got this Las Vegas bombing update, and we're asking the question in this show today, are American military veterans a terrorist breeding ground? Because that's the accusation, folks. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube, our X-Spaces simulcast, and on Truth Social Plus. So go check us out there. Yesterday, the Las Vegas sheriff just gave, as you just saw, gave this major update on the car bombing at the Vegas Trump Tower that happened on New Year's Day. Many of us, especially in the veterans community, have a lot of questions for reasons that we may get some answered by this new information, but as the sheriff just said, a lot of new questions have been raised with this additional information. In my opinion, Green Beret Master Sergeant Matthew Livelsberger just doesn't fit the profile for your typical radicalized terrorist, and that is a big reason why we all have so many questions, and another reason why they need to get answered. And the other reason I have is that I'm very concerned that veterans as a group may be being targeted to be presented to our fellow citizens as the biggest domestic terror threat our country faces. Therefore, I want as many answers to the questions made publicly as possible. It's also why I supported the public release of the initial email document, now confirmed by the FBI as authentic in that press conference yesterday, by veterans Sam Shoemate and Sean Ryan on the Sean Ryan Show a few days ago. Our government has withheld and obfuscated vital information the public needs from many terrorist attacks and incidents for far too long. Only the sunlight of truth will help return the trust between we citizens and our government in both directions. I can't emphasize it enough. The government has to trust us too. It's also the reason why I chose today's guest, because we have to publicly broadcast as much of the facts as possible from reliable sources. Matt Tardio served and worked directly with Master Sergeant Livelsberger. As a Green Beret, Matt led several operations in Afghanistan that decimated ISIS-K, thank you very much, without losing a single Green Beret. In addition to his time in the military fighting against terrorists around the world, Matt gained knowledge and experience as a police officer who has trained numerous SWAT teams and officers to respond to active shooter situations. Matt is also the host of Speak the Truth, which you can find on YouTube using the @ Speak the Truth Actual. I highly recommend you go watch his show that he did last night after you check us out on this show, because it's going to go into a lot more detail than we're able to in this short amount of time. Matt Tardio, sir, welcome to the Rob Maness Show, and thank you so much for your service. Appreciate it.
Sir, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, sir. I greatly appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. I really wish it was under different circumstances, if we're being perfectly honest. I don't think anybody saw this coming, and I don't think anybody, regardless of whether or not they knew him, wants it to be true. Let's just be honest about that.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right, man. Just before we dive into the new information we have, can you just talk about Sergeant Livelsberger from your perspective? You're the only person that I've seen in the media sphere, and that's our space here, that has actually worked with this man. What do you know about him? And as you just said, we're all surprised, and we don't even want it to be true, but we still have to dig for all the facts.
Yeah. So when I knew him, he was a dedicated Green Beret. He was very professional, always on his job and constantly digging for more. There was nothing, I would say, extra spectacular about the guy that would cause him to stick out in any way that, I would hold him above the rest, because I think everybody in that community kind of has their own little niche. And when it's time for you to fit in your niche, you knock out your job. And I've never once heard a single complaint about anybody out of. Never. Even the guys that currently are working with him are all saying that, nope, he's a stand-up guy. He's always part of his game, loved his family, absolutely loved his family, was moving into other positions to try to get more time with his family, which is something that, some guys will do from time to time, but other guys won't. And he very much cared for his family and wanted to move in these positions to try to get more family time, from what I understand.
Yeah, that's pretty typical of folks in these small, specialized communities like the Green Berets, my old community, EOD. Same kind of thing. As you change position and move to greater supervision, you get more family time. You get opportunities to go to jobs where you get more family time, but you're still dedicated to the work. And it's just very unusual for somebody in our communities to act on this kind of stuff, to take this kind of action. Now you did a show yesterday. I've reviewed some of it, and I downloaded what they did release from the sheriff's office. I think of the 6-page document, I got about 4 pages of it, and it's really a good journalistic timeline. I say good in the sense that it's a timeline with dates, and it looks like a journaling timeline that's in much more detail than what we saw with the 2-page document that was first released, and there in the email that was released by Sean, Ryan, and Sam. There really wasn't much of a timeline on that at all. It was more of a information blocks from my perspective. Did you see anything in his timeline? And in the next segment, Matt, we're going to talk about the bombing itself and show the sequence from him putting the fuel in the back of the truck all the way through the detonation and everything. But for this segment, did you see anything in the timeline that stood out to you as I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, as out of the ordinary for somebody like him with his background to have been, jotting down what he's thinking day by day? I mean, were there anything unusual? I mean,
yeah. So that type of jotting down or timeline is, I got to be careful about how I go about wording this, but that type of timeline is indicative of somebody that thinks that they are getting tailed and wanting to make sure that they are documenting who is doing it and where they're at, that they're actually concerned with being tailed. Speaking with some folks that have been close to him recently, they're all telling me that the verbiage that he's using in that timeline document does sound like his style of writing. So that, at least from the people that knew him, say that's adding up for how he would write. The Sean Ryan email that ended up coming out first with Shoemate doesn't necessarily sound like his style of writing from everybody that I know. Yeah, I don't know how else to place that. It's almost like two different people.
Yeah, that's exactly the way my impression was when I read the email that Sean and Sam put out, and then the two-page document that came out of the first. I don't know if there were I think there are multiple devices involved in this, multiple phones and multiple laptops. So the second 2 pages came out, and I looked at the two of those, and they seem to be written by two different people.
Right.
And then now you get this one, and it's even written differently than the 2-page, although there's a little bit less dissimilarity there. But so is this something like I heard somebody say, well, maybe he's practicing tradecraft and he's putting out something on one device that's trying to I'm trying to be careful how I say it. That's trying to cast a shadow on what he really wants to say. I mean, is that? I'm not a tradecraft guy, to be honest with you. I don't have any training in that other than working with special ops guys and some intelligence guys. So is that logical? Is that a
I mean, that's just an area
standard
that I'm going to
operating
stay away
procedure
from.
kind of thing?
If you don't mind, sir, I wouldn't mind just staying clear of that area just for, so the government doesn't come after me.
Fair enough. Fair enough. On the timeline that we see now itself, it's a daily. I don't think he skipped any days from like the 26th or 27th. May have even gone back earlier than that to the 21st. Why do you? And it shows that I thought he was going to go. If I just read that and didn't know anything, I thought he had picked the target of this glass bridge at the Grand Canyon.
Right.
But obviously, we don't have the entire document. He had some kind of change. Did you pick up anything in analyzing the timeline that you're able to see?
Yeah, I'm going to grab it.
What would drive him to do that?
On what would drive him to do what he did? No. As far as an absurdity or, something that just seemed off to me in the timeline, yes. And it had to do with the date that he was talking about being in, I believe it was either New Mexico or Arizona. And it showed him, I want to say on his timeline, he was noting that he was picking up an Airbnb, I think like the 28th or something over in Arizona, or at least it read that way as I looked at it. But since then, I've actually kind of like reread it a little bit. And what I've been able to discover, because I've also talked to somebody else that had she has already made herself public. It was his former girlfriend that he had texted while he was still in Colorado. Since I've reached out to her, and she's provided me with a lot of videos, photos, text messages, things like that. And it kind of cleared that up to me. So it would look like, at least in my opinion, after reviewing some of the videos and things like that he was in Trinidad, Colorado on the 31st of January, at least around 7:30 a.m. Looks like he was rise and shine out of bed around that time and was ready to hit the road probably around 8:30, 9 a.m. On the 31st. And that would have given him plenty of time to make his way down. He would definitely, at that point in time, he'd been able to make plenty of stops, been able to pick up anything that he needed to. He definitely had a couple hours to play with.
Yeah, it's very interesting that he appears to have changed whatever the target location, and there's really not a whole lot of information in what we have now. So I guess that's one of the questions that I still have is why he chose the Trump Tower in Vegas as opposed to going to the Grand Canyon. To the initial location he was talking about. We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll see video of the sequence that was released in the press conference yesterday, Matt. And we'll talk. I want to get you to talk through that to describe for folks what we're seeing as we go through this, because I think it probably answers a lot of the questions that a lot of us initially had. One of which was, how did he shoot himself and set the device off at the same time or near simultaneously? We'll be right back with Matt Tardio on the Rob Maness Show here on Worldview Tube.
All right, everybody, we're in a commercial break.
As the sheriff pointed out, we have a few developments, one on the video analysis and the video evidence that we've recovered, the other is on the physical evidence that we've recovered from the vehicle, and finally the digital forensics. So I'll begin with the video analysis. We now have video footage that we're able to confirm that the suspect did prepare and stage for his planned attack. You'll see the suspect here in the video. He'll end up pulling out a can of racing fuel from the back of the vehicle, and then he'll start pouring that racing fuel onto the back where there's contents of explosive materials. You'll see that in just a moment here. It's a white can. We did recover that can from the vehicle and did confirm that it was racing fuel. In addition to this video, after you see him pouring it, you're going to see as the vehicle drives away, you'll end up seeing fuel leaking from the vehicle, which is consistent with what you're seeing him pour. So he'll seal the vehicle right here, and then he'll start driving off, and you'll start seeing traces of fuel that's dripping from the back of the vehicle. You'll see other parts here, and you guys can take a closer look after the fact too to try to see the dark spots versus the spots that were dry before. In addition to this video, we also have additional evidence that includes showing that the vehicle was leaking upon his arrival to Trump Towers. So in just a moment here, you'll start seeing right there, you'll see a trail of liquid falling from the back of the vehicle. And you'll see a before and after comparison in just a moment of the valet right before he drives onto the valet area and after, which will show you the fuel leaking from the vehicle. The other thing is there's a video here that we're going to show you that will show that his hands are on the steering wheel as he's driving up to the valet. There was some conversation about whether the vehicle was in self-driving mode. We've already addressed that in terms of the technical data that we collected, but also you can see that his hands are on the steering wheel as he's pulling up. And then finally, we're going to show a video here, and ATF will elaborate on this a little further in their briefing, but of the explosion that occurs. You're going to see frame by frame, you'll see an initial flash prior to the larger explosion. So we'll pause right there. That's the initial flash that happens right before the large explosion. You're going to see a still in a moment. Right there's the initial flash. And then following that is the large explosion. The other thing that you're seeing circled in red there is, we believe, fumes from all of the racing fuel that was poured inside the vehicle and on the back. It ignited first, which is consistent with the briefing that you're going to get from the ATF on how the actual explosive materials were ignited. The next area I want to talk about briefly is the physical evidence recovered from the vehicle. There were 3 cart casings, .50 caliber expended cart casings that were recovered. You can see images from the forensics there. What's very important about these cart casings in terms of what happened in that vehicle, 2 of the cart casings had primers that were burned out due to the intense heat. This is consistent with the type of explosion that we believe occurred, and again, ATF will expand a little bit more on that. However, 1 of the 3 cart casings, as you can see, shows that the primer was punched, which basically means that it was shot through a gun, which is consistent with what we believe happened, that he ended up using the firearm to commit suicide.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday. My guest is former Green Beret and law enforcement officer Matt Tardio, who's been analyzing this incident along with many of us others that are out here looking at this, because we're very concerned about that this individual felt like he had to take this action, number one, and who the individual is. Master Sergeant Livelsberger, an active duty Green Beret with long experience, both in combat, in special operations, and Matt worked with him. But we want to look at this analysis that they did to answer some questions that we've had. And Matt, one of the questions I had the first time I ever looked at the initial reporting was, well, why didn't he use tannerite? Because you can get tannerite at your feed store in Indiana. My goodness.
Sure.
And apparently he did end up using tannerite. And that has led me to some more questions that I want to give you a chance to talk through what you're seeing in this video analysis from the perspective of what an individual with Matt's level of training should know about and how that exhibits it or doesn't exhibit that training in what we're seeing here.
Yeah. So Matt Livelsberger started off his career as an 18 Echo. So he was not a demolition sergeant, but all team members, everybody on an ODA is going to get demolition pay, and they are going to get cross-trained in demolitions. And he's been doing that job for quite a while. So he has handled demolition quite a bit. Now, that is to say, you know, if everything's done by the book, which I think a lot of people on teams will admit, it's just not. You know, I'm also supposed to be cross-trained in communications, but does it always work out that way? No, I'm going to take my radio and hand it off to the Echo and tell them to fill it, right? But, you know, when it comes to demolitions, it's a little bit different, right? You've got guys that you're going to want to slap charges on doors. They're going to be familiar with basic setups. They're going to be familiar with like the concept of it. And we haven't even got to that point of the briefing yet, but it does slightly apply. When they talk about him using ChatGPT to attempt to convert the tannerite into a net explosive weight, or wanting to know what the new is going to end up being, he's attempting to use some of that demolition knowledge. And so according to his ChatGPT history, he's got a good idea of what the net explosive weight is, which you and I know this. It's, you know, TNT equivalents. You're taking, not all explosives are created equally. They either deflagrate or detonate at a different degree. And so when we end up having that, we have to convert everything over to a common picture, so we know roughly the size of damage, if you will, or blast zone, or minimum safe distance, or, you know, whatever the target is, what our desired effects on that target are going to be. And we use the net explosive weight in order to calculate that. So he is attempting to do that with everything it would appear in the back of his vehicle, plus the tannerite that he ended up picking up. And it wasn't tannerite by brand name. It was, forget what the heck it was, but ammonium nitrate, aluminum powder mixed together. Tannerite's got their own little special blend, but yeah.
So
he's knowledge, he could be building a little bit better.
Yeah. What I saw in the analysis still had, my question still is this. They say that he shot himself intraorally, which I'm assuming means through the mouth with the pistol.
Correct.
The 50, the double eagle, and then a few seconds later, the blast went off. The device detonated. When you look at the pictures slowed down, or even the stills, you see him profiled well after the detonation goes, and it looks like everything's intact. His head's intact and those kind of things. Can you explain? I think I have a good understanding of why that is now that I've been able to look at this entire sequence of events. But I think you have a much better expertise in that. I've seen some of the things you've talked about in this vein. Can you just explain to folks why that would still look that way? Why his head would still appear to be intact, even though the device has now gone off and the police are saying he's already had the intraoral gunshot wound?
Sure. Yeah, this is based on the assumption that dome camera had a frame rate of around 30 frames per second, but each frame of that camera would be about 0.03 seconds. as we look at that. So that first flash that they ended up putting up on the screen is about 0.03 seconds. The second one where it comes up and engulfs his body would, add an additional 0.03 seconds. And so that bullet coming out of that pistol with a 50 AE is going anywhere between, 1,400 foot per second, say 1,900 foot per second, depending on what loadout he's shooting. And with that being said, that bullet within that first frame has already traveled roughly 40 to 50 feet, somewhere in there, depending on how quick it was going out the barrel. And the second frame, that sucker is all the way up over 90 feet, theoretically speaking, traveling out that muzzle. So there's not quite enough time yet for that to happen. And the reason his body is going to end up sitting up in that way is because the kinetic energy of that particular projectile is 350 grains. So we use mass times velocity squared with a little bit more math added on top to get, our foot-pounds of energy that's coming through. But essentially that energy is going into his head. And as that bullet's going through it, it's dissipating that energy, IG, it's dragging his head back. So as that bullet's going through, it's dragging his head back. It'd be seating him up a little bit. And that would be your explanation. And I don't think it had quite enough time yet within that first second to completely deform his head.
Yeah, great explanation. I've had to do that similar explanation on a video camera on the north gate of the Pentagon that caught the aircraft going through, that people swear to God is a missile when it's really an aircraft when you slow it down and take a look at it. So that explains why. I mean, because he is upright when you look at the stills. So now we know from this video his hands are on the steering wheel. He was driving. The car wasn't driving itself, and we have a reason for him to be upright, even though we wouldn't logically, our minds would tell us that it should look like that.
He should drop and slump over, is what a lot of people think, right? Like he should just immediately slump.
That's what a lot of people think. Yeah, so that's a lot of questions answered from my mind. I didn't get a chance to hear the ATF's explanation, Matt. Did they say how that he triggered the charge? Did he shoot around? I don't think he shot around at the Tannerite.
I don't think so either. ATF said no. They're exploring 3 possible explanations for it. One being the gunshot set off the gas inside the vehicle, the air fuel mixture that they had going on. He dumped, I forget how many gallons of racing fuel in the back of that thing. And those fumes are going to leach their way into the vehicle. And this is going to bring in my next point, which why would the explosion appear down low on the floor and then start working its way up? And we can talk about that in a sec. So those fumes are going to leach their way and start working into that vehicle with the fuel dumped into the back. And so what the ATF said was that it could be either A, the gunshot wound itself, or the gunshot he fired ignited those fumes and then caused that to spread to the rear of the vehicle and then detonate from there, or deflagrate is the word that they use, which is appropriate in this case. 2 is that there was some sort of an electrical short inside of the vehicle. And the third one, I forget what it was. Oh, they said that he could have sparked a fuse. They didn't use the word fuse. It was like twine, something of that nature that they assumed was stretched from the cab of the truck into the, I don't know. It's a Tesla truck. Do you call it a trunk? Do you call it a freaking bed? I have no idea. But into the back where the charge is.
Yeah. That's one of the questions I had, because I don't know the construction of the Tesla truck, the Cybertruck. Is there an opening between the driver's area and the bed of the truck that he can run?
Not that I'm aware of.
Down into?
Not that I'm aware of. But if I'm going to do this, I'm gonna make sure there's a way to do it. Right.
Yeah. So you could see, and they. Absolutely. So you could see that the small gas explosion underneath the vehicle that they circled in the video. Is that related to why the explosion appeared to start on the floor?
So they circle it down on the floor, right? Or they show it down on the driver's side door where it's blowing through the seal and coming out that way. That's just indicative of, all of the pressure being pushed through, blowing the seal, and it, fire reaching for air, right? Like that's what it's going to want in order to breathe. The reason it going down on the floor has to do with the weight of the gas that's off gas or vented off from the race fuel. As it goes in the air, it's actually heavier than air itself. So that's going to start sinking a little bit lower. So as it's coming in, obviously he's going to be able to smell it, but the bulk of it's going to start concentrating much lower down there on the floor. And the 50 AE, man, and the one that they showed has ported barrel that looks like a muzzle brake almost that you would see on a Barrett 10750 cal. Just big freaking ports just onto every side. And so, you almost have to get a little bit graphic with it, depending on how deep he had that sucker buried in his mouth and what's actually being thrown out of there. Kind of goes into question. It could also explain why initially it doesn't spark right up by his head. There is always a potential for burning gunpowder, and all it takes is a spark, when you're dealing with like fuel air mixtures like that. It could also be that casing had been ejected down to the floorboard, catches that gas on fire, and then starts up from the floorboard, working its way out towards him.
That's the piece I was missing, is the casing could have done it. And because I'm just trying to figure out what makes logical sense from this sequence of events based on the facts we now know and what the outcome was. Well, Matt, we got to take another break. When we come back, I want to dive deeper into his mindset and everything, because part of this show is about veteran suicide. And as the officer said, they think they've confirmed that this was a suicide based on what I've read. I would agree with them on that. I want to get your take on that, but also step through some of the things that we see in the writing we did get out of this information, and just talk through some of it to see what he was thinking about as to the reason why he ultimately took this last step. We'll be right back with Matt Tardio here on the Rob Maness Show at Worldview Tube Live.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access
All right, everybody, we are halfway through.
Radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
Forensic analysis of his phone. There's a variance of grievances and a constant evolution of his plans or intents of what he wanted to do. There's mentions of political and social and cultural issues to include criticism of the current administration. He also does write in there that he was super high on weed and drinking, which we are still working to confirm. And then he discusses the Cybertruck being used as a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. He also says that he has graphic encounters from his military experience that replay in his head over and over, and that now he feels like he's a shell of a human being with nothing to live for. This is important not only because it points out the suicidal component, but it also talks about the mental health that he was dealing with, mental health issues that he was dealing with. Just continuing on that manifesto, a few other excerpts for now is he discusses the concerns about the withdrawal from Afghanistan and losing his teammates, which again builds upon that potential PTSD that we're referring to. He does transition at some point and talks about being concerned of the media labeling him as a terrorist and that he had no intent on killing anyone else aside from himself. But finally, one of the last points in there, because this constant flow back and forth of different thoughts, he does talk about his intent to make this as public as possible, and that he is loaded up on boom and quotations and fireworks for New Year's.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show here on Worldview Tube Live and our X Spaces simulcast. My guest today is former Green Beret and law enforcement officer Matt Tardio, and we're working through some analysis of the new information that was released by the Las Vegas Sheriff's Department, the FBI, and the ATF yesterday to see if we can get some of our questions answered. And we've had some of the questions answered. Matt, I just wanted to dive into, since this this looks like a veteran suicide, which is, you hope that we can reduce these things, but we don't seem to be able to make any headway with them. And folks in communities like yours and like my old community, they're pretty resilient, but we do have some on occasion. And the interesting thing about the writings that we got yesterday, the officer talked about it a little bit. I wanted to just lay out that Sergeant Levelsberger had an objective. His objective was clearly stated that he wants to be as detailed as possible to assist the investigators so that they can focus on the task at hand. And here's the objective. I was a little bit surprised by this: removing the Democrat Party elements in the current administration and future remaining generals in the military and Joint Chiefs. That surprised me because he went to a political party description on part of that. Removing the generals and those kind of things. A lot of us have called for accountability and those kind of things, but that political objective really did surprise me. Does it surprise you based on what you've read about his state of mind and everything?
Well, it surprises me based on the personal testimony of people that have known him very intimately over the last, year of his life. And one of those is that while he may have been a Trump supporter, he was not ultra MAGA. And I've used this own assessment on myself before. I voted for Donald Trump this year, but I don't agree with his stance on the 2A and when it comes to red flag laws here in the United States of America. I find them to be unconstitutional myself. There's a lot of people that disagree with that. So you can vote for somebody and not 100% agree with everything that they're doing and or everything that they're saying. The biggest inconsistency, I think, that I would point out in that letter, because if we are to take the narrative that it is a veteran suicide, and he thoroughly believed all of those things, and he was trying to make a statement, and this is PTSD related. That would suggest that he is in a certain state of mind, and that state of mind has gone into a state that I couldn't even possibly imagine by mixing reality with whatever he's dreaming up in his head. But it still keeps it based in reality. Now, I was talking to a psychologist earlier who told me that it is possible for him to kind of be able to mask those things from the people that are around him and to be able to still have a firm grasp on reality. And so I kind of look at it this way: you former EOD guy, right? If I was a cell leader and we were going to target him and we were following him and we knew he was either going to be heading to the Grand Canyon or Vegas, and let's say you're the EOD guy that is going to be attached to my cell and we're going to go hit this vehicle. If I asked you where is the safest place to assault that vehicle, where would that be, knowing his route that he's on?
Yeah, somewhere. Go ahead.
I would assume somewhere out in the open, right? Somewhere across the open desert,
exactly.
Arizona, everything else. So, yeah, I mean,
you beat me to it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Right. So here's one of these inconsistencies that, and there's many more. That's just a real subtle example, so a guy of that type of training, and he would have to be, because he's keeping to a certain timeline. He's got his route checked out. He's got everything else. So he would have that state of mind as he's going through it. And yet he is still thinking that he's got everybody tailing him, but he's able to lay everything out. So if that narrative is correct, if that's actually true, then he is on a whole different level when it comes to PTSD, at least in my opinion, for when people talk about PTSD and they refer to it, this would be like, the top percent of the percentage point, like fraction thereof, that people rarely would ever make it to, is what you would have to believe on that one.
Yeah, and that's a great description of what he was doing. But here is what he wrote, and this also surprised me a little bit. But when I look at the big picture of everything that was going on in his mind, and when he wrote this, these graphic encounters replay in my head every day, all day, and it's ruined my relationships with my family and friends. I am now a shell of a human being with nothing to live for. It has all been taken away by my affiliations. When I read that, I was like, okay, he is psychotically crashing or has crashed, but he's still able to function using his professional training and his professionalism at the same time, which is really, when I think about it, that's what I would expect of somebody at his level. But you're right, man. This is just way above any percentage of individual that I've ever encountered before in this. Well, we've got some hands up. Let's take some questions from the audience real quick before we get into the last break. Go ahead. Patriot Rob is the host over there. Go ahead, Rob.
Thanks, Colonel. Thanks, Matt. Our first question is from Angela. Angela, go ahead.
Hey there, thanks for having me. I know that on Sean Ryan's show they had mentioned something about the DNA not matching. What was that all about?
Excellent question. And I have an answer for you that I have from a friend of mine that just reached out over to the Army PAO. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to go ahead and pull this up. And I don't want to misquote, and I want to make sure I get it correct, because it is one of those things that you want to make sure you get correct. But it would seem like the PAO was reaching a little bit. They said, and I'll quote, that he was told by a trusted source about the DNA thing, and that he speculated to Sean Ryan's lawyer that they could have sent him off the deep end. He said he should have been more clear that it was just speculation. So apparently that statement was made and that it was speculative, and that's coming from a trusted friend of mine.
That's good information to get out there. I mean, as you know, and those that don't deal with conditions on the battlefield or crisis incidents, the initial information quite often is scrambled, is incorrect, and you have right info mixed thoroughly with wrong information. And that's why we're going to continue to pull the thread on this until we get as many of the true facts out as possible. One more question before we go on. Go ahead, Rob.
All right, we're going to go with I'm Back Jack. Jack, what's going on?
Hey, Rob, how are you? I just wanted to speak to the flame you see coming out between the driver's door and the front of the passenger door on the left side of the vehicle. It looks like that may be an airbag vent. When the airbags go off in these vehicles, they create so much pressure inside the cabin that it harms the passenger's eardrums. So they put vents in the vehicles to release the pressure. I'll bet if you had a video of the passenger side, you would see similar flame coming out from a similar location.
Okay, do you have a question?
As far as what's that?
Do you have a question?
No. I just wanted to point out that I believe that's what you see. The flame coming out the bottom is just the explosion releasing through that vent.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You got it, buddy.
That's logical, but it's not the airbag causing the flame, I don't believe. I didn't see any indications that the airbags went off, but I could be wrong about that. Matt, did you see anything?
No, I didn't. And, I've shot plenty of airbag canisters in my day, and they do make a nice little poof. But that, I didn't see that.
Yeah. Yeah. So with his mindset and what we've seen him write down about all the surveillance, does it indicate to you that he was completely delusional about the surveillance? Because he's pretty detailed about people that he picked up. I know he's got some training in this environment and everything. There were a couple of things when I read through it, I'm like, well, as a layperson that's not used to reading that kind of reporting or note taking from that perspective, he could have had that wrong, and I'm sure that happens quite frequently. But he seemed pretty consistent with a couple of these individuals and vehicles and those kind of things. Did you get anything out of that whole sequence from the surveillance perspective? Anything deeper into his mindset as he was going along?
Well, let's start off with I believe it was the FBI spokesperson said that they are not releasing all of the notes because they do contain classified information inside of them that he ended up having. So I'd be really curious to see like the unredacted actual notes, screenshots that end up coming out of there, whatever it was that he had on there. Chances are it'll still remain redacted just because it's all classified, but it very well could be that he had surveillance on him, let's be honest, and that he was picked out license plates of actual government vehicles. And that they failed to act, and maybe they're not putting that information out. The thing that doesn't jive with me that I start really thinking about is the text message conversations of the texts that I have seen during that time frame that he was sending out. Don't really indicate the same state of mind that those letters are portraying. They're completely and totally different in writing. And those are the ones that are floating around on social media. I'll tell you, there is two videos that I ended up seeing that tell me that, well, maybe he did go a little bit over the deep end, but also to me, it just seems like he's just a guy having a good time, which maybe that could be the case because he knows he's on his way out to where he is just jamming out and enjoying the Tesla truck. Again, though, it doesn't seem like when I observe it, and I'm not going to release it, but when I observe it, it doesn't seem like he's high or drunk or anything of that nature. He just seems like a dude either A, going down the road, or B, showing off this Tesla Cybertruck. It doesn't seem like he is in a delusional state of mind. There was nothing in those texts that I read that would seem that way. There's nothing in those videos that I saw that would seem that way. I couldn't tell you. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Well, and that's why, it leads me to my main question about all this, that our veterans being set up to be portrayed to our fellow citizens as a hotbed of the creation of domestic terrorism. And when we come back from this last break, we'll get into that. And I'll show a little video from Lawrence O'Donnell, who has already stated what I just said. We'll be right back with Matt Tardio. We're discussing the incident and bombing at Trump Tower in Las Vegas.
Lawrence O'Donnell can kiss my ass.
The simple fact is this country has suffered more deadly terrorism at the hands of American-born citizens who are veterans of the United States military than people who have crossed into this country at the southern border. It is very clear from the evidence that if you want to worry about terrorism in this country, the United States Army is a much bigger problem than the southern border.
I'm sorry, the 20 years we spent at war defending this country, dying from suicide and bombs, I thought had erased the "you're a baby killer," but I guess it hadn't. I guess they're right back to it. Everything else the Democrats have tried has failed, so why not go there? Why not blame the military? Why not blame the veterans? Why not blame the 25 million veterans in this country that have served it honorably and have sacrificed for it? Because you can point out a dozen over the last 40 years that have done something terrible. What's funny to me is he's hinging on this terrorism or terrorist. Listen, we had Saudi Arabians come in this country and take 2 airplanes and fly them into buildings, and we still don't know how in the hell that happened. You can be as liberal as you want to be in this country and say anything you want to say. But to sit there and say, to justify an open border policy, or maybe just because you hate Trump that much, to say that the United States Army is a breeding ground for terrorists is not only shameful, it's absolutely despicable. And thank God that little small human being doesn't sit in front of me in person anytime soon, because the Georgia and me would come out in a heartbeat. That is absolutely insane. And the reason why it bothers me so much is if you look at this narrative that we have for what happened in Las Vegas, there's all kind of conspiracy theory around it, and I don't trust in my government enough to say any of it is true or false, but what we know in fact is that this guy served his country honorably for 18 years. And by all accounts of what he left was not trying to hurt anyone but himself, because he was to the point of delusion from the trauma he received going to war for this country. It's tragic, it's wrong, it's illegal, it's criminal, it's completely irresponsible, but it's not freaking evil like driving down a sidewalk and mowing people over. So that veteran is not the same as the other veteran. And for someone like Lawrence O'Donnell that's been in this business as long as I've been alive to say something like that, I mean, Jesus Christ, they've lost all sense of decency, and it's just about getting the right headline in front of the right people, and it's absolutely sickening.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're discussing with my guest today, former Green Beret and law enforcement officer and podcast host of Speak the Truth, Matt Tardio, this incident, but also the underlying issue that Johnny Joey Jones there, who is a Marine, by the way, defending the Army. I'm an airman defending the Army, defending my fellow brother and sister warriors, because our community is not a hotbed of creating domestic terrorists. We love this country. And Matt, I wanted to talk to you about this because you're a leader in America with this special background that Master Sergeant Livelsberger has had, and we're all saddened by what has occurred here. And Johnny Joey is exactly right that Sergeant Livelsberger is much different than the asshole that did the killing in New Orleans. Even though they were both technically Army soldiers, the profiles are completely different. And the other guy is a typical jihadi radicalized individual. There's been a few of those from the armed forces. And there's been a few from the armed forces that have committed terrorist acts. Timothy McVeigh is one. But we are not a breeding ground like O'Donnell is now accusing us of being to try to make excuses for bad policy. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to start off with the same thought that that news anchor had, which is kiss my ass, number one. Number two, I find it pretty offensive that he's saying it's not the illegal immigrants that are coming across the border that are causing all these problems. Well, that would assess that he is tracking the number of illegals and that he is aware that these illegal immigrants are not committing these crimes, and that he would also know that these people are not getting put into the system because cops are just not wanting to deal with them, and or there is nothing that they can do about it because local law enforcement officers cannot act on federal law. There's a lot of states even down that are not allowing local law enforcement officers. As a matter of fact, I name one for me, please. That is allowing local law enforcement to enforce federal law when it goes to that. And it's not like ICE is overwhelmed or anything like that at the time because of the millions of illegals that have been pouring across the border underneath the Biden administration. Now, with all of that being said, and we look at it, I'll reiterate, kiss my ass, number one. Number two, I'd also throw out there that the veteran population has been overworked for the last 20 years. And like you said, they've been doing a very good job, in the global war on terror. And guys like Livelsberger, myself, greater men than me that you'll never know their name, have way more combat experience, have seen way, way, way more combat than I could ever imagine. I've done some wild stuff. And they're not blowing gaskets. They're not out there doing bad things. These are men and women who are in leadership positions around this country. He could have talked about the veterans that are in Congress. He could have talked about the veterans that have made it up into Senate. He could have talked about a number of veterans that are out there doing amazing things. He could have been talking about the Green Berets that are out there saving people's butts in North Carolina and Georgia and South Carolina, where the federal government has failed them, that are now veterans. But he has refused to do that. So kudos to you, sir, for making yourself look like a jackass.
Yeah, exactly right. Speaking of Green Berets, we're going to have a Green Beret. It's the National Security Advisor. Mike Waltz is going to be the National Security Advisor under President Trump. So there are just so many millions of Americans that have done such great work to taint us with that broad brush to try to make an excuse for this policy. And I'll just point out one other thing. There have been probably more than 1,000 people on the terror watch list that have been allowed to get through the southern border under the Biden administration. And we don't know yet what influence they had, whether they did some training for Jabbar down in New Orleans, whether they provided him with assets and resources in order to build his devices and properly place them and to set up the strategy and tactic of using a vehicle to try to kill and maim as many people as possible. Those individuals that have come through could very well and are likely involved in activities like that.
It's not could very well, brother. It's not, they could very well. They are, right? Back,
Yeah.
I want to say it was April of this year, there was a Hezbollah terrorist that got caught on the border of the United States. But the crazy part from at least the news articles that I read was that this guy got picked up by CBP for entering the country illegally. And he was released after he got screened. He didn't pop on the terror watch list. ICE ended up catching it and tracking him down a couple days later. I want to say it was like 7 or 10 days later. They ended up tracking him down and picking him up. And when he's getting interviewed by ICE, who, number one, arrested him for illegal entry into the United States of America, which he should have been arrested for in the first place. And then number two, he ends up telling ICE that he was going to go to New York and build a bomb and blow people up. So to state that that's not an issue, it is an issue. It's a massive issue. And if it wasn't for the men and women on the border down there in CBP, in ICE, who, by the way, are also going to be a lot of veterans in that community, grabbing them and picking them up, more things would have been exploding inside of this country.
You're absolutely right. And more will if we don't get a handle on it. Well, we got time for one more question, Matt. I'm going to go ahead and take it. I think we've got one question over in the audience here real quick. Go ahead, Rob.
All right, sir, we have Cookie. Cookie, go ahead, my friend.
Hey, thanks. Great show. Question is so we're lousy at mental health in this country. So is there something or mental health experts that are specific towards either military guys or combat veterans or even to, first responder, law enforcement? Is there like specific people that go out and work with veterans?
Great question, Matt. Do you know of anything?
Yeah, there's a lot of organizations that end up working with veterans, nonprofits. There's nonprofits that will connect veterans to other organizations. I mean, there's actually quite a few. My favorite is the Green Beret Foundation, for obvious reasons. But I think there's a huge gap when it comes in the mental health community on at least the doctor side of the house. I feel like there is a huge, I don't want to say void. Like we're missing out on a couple things when it goes down to studying the effects of combat on the human brain, specifically the chemical releases that take place inside of the human brain and what it actually does to you on that level. And when people are getting, given these SSRIs and things like that, the antidepressant medication, what they're attempting to do is change the chemistry inside of the mind. And so if we're so caught up that we're doing medication to change chemistry inside of the mind and we don't understand the chemistry that it happens over that period of time, we're essentially just throwing stuff at it, trying to make it stick and hoping it works. And I don't agree with that assessment at all. There's another issue inside of the military. I did a podcast a couple of years ago, got reached out to by a psychologist from Fort Bragg. And what she had told me was that our active duty service personnel, when they walk into that office, they get 3 appointments. This doctor is given 3 appointments by her leadership. Appointment number 1 to assess, and that's also going to include the in-doc paperwork, bring them in, figuring out who they are, trying to get some background information. The second appointment, by the end of the third appointment, these are 1-hour appointments. By the end of the third appointment, they're required to have a diagnosis and treatment plan in place in order to move on to the next patient. That's just unacceptable.
Yeah. It's a frustrating environment, has been for decades now. Totally agree with you. And you can go to groups like, I'll throw out one of mine that I've worked with on the board of directors, Military Veterans Advocacy, can connect you if you're having problems. Code of Vets on X is another good place to reach out for resources. They have a really good connection out in Texas, near the Houston, Texas area with a camp that actually specializes in PTSD. It's a residence program, and we can help, but we got to know about it, and that's a challenge that we all have to continue to live with. And like Sergeant Jones said in his critique of O'Donnell, this man, what we know about him is he served honorably in the United States Army for over 18 years and dedicated his life to killing bad guys for America and saving American citizens. That's what we know. And we need to do as much as we can to figure out why he felt compelled to take this action and ultimately took the action, Matt. Well, thank you very much for coming on today. Go ahead and tell folks where they can find you one more time and what they can look forward to when they subscribe to you on your YouTube channel, because they should.
Oh, Yeah, you absolutely should. Yeah, we focus on geopolitics over in the Middle East, war in Ukraine, also some stuff here over at home. Do pretty in-depth analysis, live sessions, and posted videos every week. You can find me over there for Speak the Truth podcast on YouTube. You can also download it on, I don't know, pick your favorite pod platform. You'll find it on there. You could also head over to Twitter. You can find me there. You can search my name, Matt Tardio, and it'll pop right up.
Roger that. And we've had your X account up on the screen every time you've been talking on the show here. Well, thank you very much, my friend. I appreciate it. Hope to have you back soon on a much different subject, hopefully not have to talk about this one again. God bless you, my friend.
God bless.
Tomorrow's Truth Thursday here on the Rob Maness Show, Worldview Tube. We'll be talking to a guy that's in the manufacturing business and how America needs to get back into it in order to deter countries like China. I'll see you then.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, well, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.